The Rainbow Tower. Written by Alex Tymms. Illustrated by R H Stewart. Episode 32. Orange. "Help me break the bone! Get him out of there!" Jed grabbed the nearest protrusion and attempted to pull it free. Graham and Clarice held on to Swenson while Katie stared at Jed, then at the bone. "Help me!" Jed shouted at them. "There's no way we can pull that apart with our bare hands," Katie said, as the pounding and shouting grew closer. "We have to try!" Jed was desperate, but it seemed Katie was right. The bone didn't even flex with his efforts. "Jed, listen to me." It was his father, looking down at his son. His eyes were at last clear of their white covering. "There's nothing you can do for me. I'm dying. That's why Swenson wants you to replace me." Jed's gaze flicked to the bile-coloured tube. "He's poisoned you, just like he's poisoned the tower." "Yes," his father replied. Then he smiled, as if it was something he'd only just remembered how to do. "I was a fool, Jed. You're not. Thankfully, there's enough of your mother in you." Jed didn't know what to feel. He'd found then lost both his parents in the blink of an eye. But she didn't get everything right. But she did try to change things, just like you. Don't ever give up trying. Any moment, those making the noise in the corridor would be upon them. "Go, now," his father went on. "We'll help you where we can, but you have to leave." Jed hesitated. "The stairs are right there. Squeeze through. Now run!" Graham and Clarice bundled Swenson ahead of them, heading for the dark shadow at the far end of the room, with Katie following. With a last look back at his father, Jed followed, as enforcers crashed into the chamber. Jed forced his way through a tiny gap and found he was in another, smaller corridor formed entirely of bone. "There'll be a door at the end. Feel for it," Jed called to the others ahead of him. "That way!" he heard someone shout behind him. The executives had caught up, and there was the familiar swish of cloaks nearby. Katie at last wrenched open the door, and they charged through as the stair lights flicked on. Last through was Jed, who felt his feet ring on the hard concrete of the landing. He turned to see enforcers forcing their way towards him, tearing at the narrow gap. The bone corridor collapsed with no warning. 1 second, Jed was staring at the blank discs of the enforcer's eyes. The next, he was enveloped in a choking cloud. At last, the dust settled, and Jed stood, staring at the pile of rubble that now blocked the way between them and their pursuers. Without a word, he turned and strode towards the stairs. He motioned for Swenson to move in front of him, and the others followed in silence. As they descended, the lights would flash off behind them and flicker on ahead of them, so that Jed could see the many flights below that twisted and turned underneath them. They came to a landing, and Jed saw Swenson glance at the door. "Don't even think about it," he gritted, and moved the chief executive on. They passed landing after landing, until Swenson announced, as if midway through a conversation with friends, "So who believes in this monster of his?" "Shut up," Jed grunted. But Swenson wasn't going to be silenced so easily. "No, but really, have any of you actually seen it?" he asked. "I have," Jed replied. "Well, of course you'd say that, wouldn't you?" Swenson glanced over his shoulder. "I meant the others." Clarice and Graham didn't reply. "You're the only monster I've seen round here," Katie said, venom in her voice. "So you're willing to take the word of this boy?" "I said shut up," Jed told him. "Everything Jed has told us," it was Clarice. about the building, about you, has been true. Ah, the classic deception, Swenson went on as he walked down the stairs. Give them a few small things that are true, then hit them with the big lie. You'd know all about that, Katie spat. And I'm not lying, Jed snapped, and he shot a glance at Graham and Clarice. Surely they believed him. But as he looked, he saw them meet the other's eye, and there was doubt on both their faces. At last, Jed saw the rough grey concrete far below, which marked the boundary of orange with yellow. We have to go out at the next landing, he said to the others. And you, he hissed at Swenson, are going to get us into the transfer lift, then instruct Yellow to take us down to Green. They arrived at the last door and found it too was sealed over on the far side. It took Graham a lot of effort to break through the plaster covering, but eventually he managed it, and they clambered through the ruined doorway. The corridor beyond was filled with the sounds of shouts coming from nearby. I want those doors sealed. You and you, take this. Don't even think about it, Jed said, raising his hand towards Swenson's face. Now move. Jed gestured towards the source of the commotion. Whatever you say, Swenson replied, glancing at Jed's palm. They stepped into the middle of chaos under the huge orange chandelier. Enforcers were trying to hold shut the transfer lift doors while orange executives bawled orders at them. From the strain showing on the doors themselves, whatever was behind them was determined to break through. Jed hesitated. The mass couldn't be here by now, could it? In truth, he'd completely lost track of how long it was since he'd left Silas and the others. What if it were here? He swallowed hard. There was nothing for it. They had to press on. The executives stopped shouting and stared as Swenson was marched into their midst, the others close behind. Tell them to open the doors, Jed hissed. Swenson hesitated as more pounding shook the lift lobby. Do it, Jed nudged him forward. As he did so, his hand lightly, almost imperceptibly, grazed Swenson's cheek. Open the doors, Swenson commanded to the nearest executive. He reached up and touched his cheek in the same spot he had felt the contact. But sir, the man tried to argue. You heard me. Swenson looked down at his fingertips. There was no burning or blistering, just a dry white residue coating the very tip of his forefinger. The enforcers released the doors, and all hell broke loose. Thank you very much for listening to The Rainbow Tower. To see more of R H Stewart's excellent artwork, you'll find him on Instagram at roy.hootson.stewart. For Alex Tymms, why not try the novel OutCaste at ao3.com? Or, for something completely different, check out the Amier series on YouTube or at amier.com, also by Alex Tymms. The Rainbow Tower. Text copyright Alex Tymms. Illustrations copyright R H Stewart. The right of Alex Tymms and R H Stewart to be identified as the author and illustrator of this work has been asserted in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988.